Hello everyone. In this video today we are going to talk about community work and community work principles, and we will talk about also some different aspects of critical perspective and what other thoughts are around this work of community principles. So to start talking about, to go further, let me share my presentation with you so that we can have some visual as well. So again, what we will cover in this short video today is first, what is community itself, what is critical community work principle, and what is stages of community work, and what is participatory community curriculum, and how can we compare the passive aspects of curriculum and the understanding and participatory creation of curriculum as well. So we can start talking about what is community itself. So we can find many different definitions of what community is, as in social sciences. About in any term there is really thousands of different definitions. But what I like to very simple. Some definitions from people and from community members are the following: that community is a place where I feel I belong and I feel safe. Community is a group of people who live, who have lived together for some time, some period of time, and they sometimes maybe don't like newcomers. This is not the one and only truth. And community can also be the place where people know each other, they pull together in times of crisis. This is also a very nice definition, and it is somewhere that all people have access to the different resources. So this is some very basic definitions of what community can be, and depending on the context and geographical areas, people might have all of the communities, they might have their own definition and their own identity, what community means for them. So the next question could be, who does a community work and what is its aim? So we all know that, okay, we do community work, but who actually are these people? And there we can identify many different actors, but some of the very common ones are international and local NGOs. And we know that who are involved in development work, they are very closely working with communities. So sometimes the community work is very much associated to development work, and development work itself is associated with transnational organizations and international and local NGOs. Besides, we can have a government as a community development worker, right? So for example, local municipalities could be doing the community work, and we can have initiative groups, some group of students, youth, and community members themselves as well, who are initiating some ideas to develop the community, and individuals as well, right? So for example, me myself in my neighborhood can be, I could be a community worker in my community if I decide if I want to change something and have positive impact. So what unites these people is that they all assume that we make positive social change. So everyone that I have described and named, they all aim to make a positive social change in their communities, and obviously they're choosing different approaches in different ways how they are going to achieve the positive change. Okay, so we know that in communities the actions can be different, right? Because the actors are different and their impacts are different. So this is very nice table for you to structure and conceptualize how these different kinds of activities look like. So we can say that we can divide collective action to individual action, because in the community we can have collective movements, but we can also have individual actions. And together with that, we can have informal engagement and we can have formal engagement. So to go through each of them, we can start, for example, what is collective informal engagement in the community? What could be example of that? And for example, one that we see on the screen is taking part in a demonstration. which is part of the community work, because I am taking part to contribute like towards a positive change, because the demonstrations normally are, we assume in this time the demonstrations are for some like good cause, and this is informal engagement because no one came and asked me to demonstrate, because I myself decided to go and be part of the demonstration, right, when it's individual decision. And there could be being a member of tenants association, for example, and there we can name formal engagement of collective actions, could be campaigning and lobbying, could be making links with decision makers, being involved in local politics, and being a school governor, for example, and so on. But what about individual action? In case of individual actions, we have making certain consumer choices. For example, what does this mean? If you go to the local supermarket and if you buy the local product, this is already your decision, your political decision, individual responsibility, that you want to help local farmers, for example, or you prefer to buy like bio products and eco products, and this is your way of protesting against the consumerist mass production, for example. So this is also, we can say that this is individual informal engagement. Volunteering, attending meetings and providing support by being there, training and skill, knowledge, experience sharing, voting. This is all formal engagement, but individual at the individual level. So all these examples are not limited, and there could be many of them, many more of them for sure, depending on the context. And this is just good to have in mind, where are you standing on this screen, on the table? Are you part of the collective action? Are you part of the formal organization, or are you engaging in your community individually or with the initiative group? So this is good for your identity to think about and reflect about, where do you stand. It is very important that to note one more time that the community, the type of community work we are talking about today is critical community work, and the critical approach based on the critical paradigm, which is mainly concerned about the social issues of social justice and social transformation. And mainly the critical approach of community work is based on the theoretical work of Gramsci and Freire, who are philosophers, educators, and sociologists, who were mainly concerned how to transform society and how to create a fairer world. So the type of community work we are talking about today assumes that all education is political and being based upon an ideological position, and this means that we are living in a context which is affecting by dominant discourse. And it's very important for community workers to being able to have political and ideological clarity, and to be able to identify which ideology, which political context influences the work of community and work of community worker herself or himself. So then another assumption is that intellectuals or educators or community workers who are going to work with community, they should be part of a process and learn from it, rather than experts who control it. So we can say here that it is very common in development work when we invite experts from different Western countries, and they come to the community and they work with communities, and there is, which is also called the policy transfer, and they are transferring their policy, saying that this is working somewhere in developed country, and now we want to transfer this policy here in developing countries, so that we assume that this is going to work here as well. This is very generalized statement from my side, but this is very a big concern in community work, to be able to learn with the community and to work with the community, rather than to go there and to say, hey, look, this is the agenda I have now, so we are now all going to adjust to what I have in my agenda and follow all these sessions. Also, I'm not going to read all of them, but one, but not the least, could be the transformations through education will be most effective if linked to mass organizations and social movements. And this means that individual effort is, of course, appreciated, but it is assumed that it is more effective, and it might have a greater impact if we cooperate with different organizations in the community and with these different social movements, and working together with group is much more effective than working individually, of course. We can move to this critical consciousness, which is one of the core aspects of community work. And critical consciousness and critical thinking can be interpreted differently in different fields and in different training environment, for example, and in different educational settings, because especially nowadays, people are very much it is very popular to say that we want to develop critical thinking, but no one really defines what does critical thinking means. But in case of critical community work, what we think that critical consciousness is that people, when people are able to recognize the structures of society which are unjust and discrimination they produce, the discriminative aspects that reproduce this unjust system. So people who are able to identify these hidden aspects of the structures and the system, and are able to organize and have collective actions against the oppressive system. So for critical community work, critical consciousness is ability and skill for humans to being able to uncover the hidden agendas of the unjust social structures. Okay, so this leads us, what then is social change exactly mean? Because if we say that we want critical consciousness and critical community work to have a fairer society, then we need also to say what is social change. And of course, here is also thousands of different definitions of what exactly social change means, and this can have a social change can be positive and negative as well, but here we assume that social change is positive, and I want to identify four main values that we want to achieve in case of social change. So the first one is social justice, which is equality and opportunity for achievement for all humans, which is security, which is one of the fundamental needs of everyone, which is livelihood, security and safety from physical threats, for example, which is participation, opportunities for everyone to play a meaningful part in development and to participate. This is one of the core values of democracy as well, and which unites all of these aspects could be the sense of solidarity as a value which combines cohesion, empathy, cooperation, and association life, because without solidarity and without this sense of empathy, it is very unlikely that people and the community will be willing to contribute towards a positive social change. And now, as we have covered more or less some theoretical backgrounds of critical community work, it is also important to shortly describe what is the role of facilitator in this process. So if we conceptualize this process, we see that we have community, but there is the community worker, right? Me as a community worker go to the community to work with these people. And this is very important for us as a community workers to reflect on our identity and to be very clear what are our values that define our work and what is basically our approaches and how do we see the role of facilitators. So here is very general ideas what the roles could be of facilitator, and of course this is limited understanding and it is up to the individual educators to reflect on their role, of course. But I want to mention a few of them, which could be promoting the participation of individuals and communities, to recognizing and challenging barriers to full and effective participation, to support communities to gain skills to engage in participation, to develop structure that enable communities to participate effectively, and to sharing good practice in order to learn from each other. So basically, you have noticed that there is a lot of participation, and this is not accidentally accident, because we can generalize and say that one of the core ideas is for community worker and facilitator is to create a space for people to learn, create a space for people to feel safe, create a space for people to give them space for sharing, because sometimes only just sharing the knowledge is awakening process, right? So in community work and in political education, people always say political awakening. So when does this political awakening happening in people's minds are when we create space for them to reflect, to really reflect, and to feel safe to express themselves. So this sounds very simple, but in reality it is very difficult to plan methodologies, theoretical framework, and to have toolkits that can help you to create such kind of place. So this is one of the things that you really need to keep in mind. About the standards of community work, here again, depending on the context and different countries, they all have different community work standards. Unfortunately, here in Georgia, where I'm recording this video at the moment, we don't have that kind of standards. But I have here one example, which I'm not going to mention of these documents. You can check out the National Occupational Standards for Community Development Work and see how the standards look like. But the key purpose of these standards are to identify the needs and opportunities, rights and responsibilities of community. Then as a next step, to plan, organize, and take action. And then as a third and final step, to evaluate the effectiveness of impact of actions. So this looks like very logical, and this is something that in very basic project management requires. But sometimes why I wanted to draw attention to this is that people think that when they go to the community, it's very simple. We go there and we do something and then we come back and this is the end of the story. But in reality, as in any other fields, we should have some standards here, because to avoid disappointments in people. Because what happens in communities is that people go there, the community workers, and they spend their few hours on, or when the project ends, they just leave, and then people are disappointed and people do not trust anymore to the NGOs or initiative groups because they feel this sense of disappointment. So that's very important for the field and for professionalization of the field to have some standards and the quality assurance methods that can help us to assure some quality and to keep community trustful towards community workers. That's very crucial. Some of the key values of community development work. I have already talked about it before, but again, to highlight is social justice, self-determination, working and learning together, sustainable communities, which is very close to ecological problems and issues, participation and reflective practice. These are some of the values that community work stands on, and something that community workers also should reflect on when they are thinking about their identity as a community worker. And now this is very important part, how in reality looks like the participatory community action or community work. And we can identify 6 steps, 6 general steps, which is also very close to what Paulo Freirean approach of community work. So we can start from step 1. When me as a community worker go to the community, what is the first thing I do? So the first thing is I am a facilitator as a researcher. So first, I need to understand what is this community, who are these people, what are their problems. I need to talk to gatekeepers, and the gatekeepers are normally people who know the best, who know the most about the community. I should read some articles or some researches about this community, if there is any, right? So it is my responsibility to have some background information, to have some knowledge before going to the community, so that I have better understanding of what these people do, how they do, and what they think and why they think. So it's community workers' responsibility, and we can call this first step as facilitators, as researchers, to understand the community background. As a second step, we can call it problem posing and codification, which is also the terminology used by Paulo Freire, and which means that we already have some background information. So now we need to identify what are the problems in the community and what these people think are their problems in the community. And then at the third step, we could have a dialogue. And dialogue is very crucial and very important core thing in critical community work, because dialogue might look very simple, that we are the two person like talking about something, but in real it's a really big concept and a really deep concept, which is closely related to creating the space, again what we talked about in the previous slide, to create the space where people talk about different things and problems. And as a second step, when they identify the problems, then we have to give them the space to dialogue and to understand where are these problems coming from, what these people think about it, what they think, what are the root causes of this problem. So the process of dialogue and to be open for different kind of ideas is very important in this space. And then we have generative themes, which means that okay, we are in dialogue, but in dialogue there could be many different ideas, and sometimes it can be chaotic, and we might not end up to have any results. So that's the idea of generative themes, is to identify 2 or 3 problems that we want to focus on and to continue working further. So we ask these people to generate some things which are very closely related to them, and they think that it's very important to be solved. And then we create a curriculum and agenda together with these people. Okay, we talked, we came together, and we identified and generated the themes, and now we need to create a curriculum, and we need to decide how we're going to talk about, what we're going to talk about in next days or as the next phase of the project. So we need to ask these people to create curriculum together with us. We mentioned participation many times, and this is exactly when the participation comes on the stage. So we don't have our own agendas as a community workers, as a critical community workers. We don't have our own agenda. We go to the community and we create agenda together with them, which is very difficult. Difficult than having prepared agenda and the following the sessions. But this is, if we want to have critical approach, that is one of the core aspects. And as a final step and final phase, we can say that we have praxis, which conceptualize this whole process. We had some action, but we need to reflect about it as well. So praxis is the constant process of action and reflection, because when we do something, then we need to sit down and think about what did we do right, what we did not do right, what can we improve, what we need to change, and what we need to appreciate as well. So part of the process of reflection and evaluation is also very crucial in this process. Also, one of the practical things, when I talked about the generative things and how does this look like in practice, I wanted to show a very small example, and how to make generative themes political as well, and to help people to identify the root causes of their problems. We can say that there are excuse me, this table. And when people talk about, for example, they identify 2 topics, and then they have to think about and reflect about what are the economic causes of these problems. And then they also should think about who controls the decision making on the problem, which is closely related to power dynamics. And in critical paradigm, challenging the power is like very important, like one of the crucial aspects. Then we ask them to reflect what are the culture, values, and beliefs held about the problem. So we need to challenge our cultural assumptions as well. And then what is the present national, provincial, and local policy on the problem? So we need to then link all these assumptions to the practical aspects and see where is this gap, where is the challenge exactly, what are the next steps we have to make. For example, if the problem is in the policy, then we have to plan advocacy campaigns against the concrete policy and to initiate new law, for example, or whatever the action requires. So this is the table which puts all what we have talked about in the practical on the table. So this helps people to understand root causes of the problems, root causes of the of some different challenges they're facing in their community. So that's one of the good tool to use when we are like planning generative things with the community. And also, when I talked about the co-creation of curriculum and why I think this is also very important to talk about a bit deeper about this, is because co-creation of curriculum is important aspects, and here can be controlling approach, and here we can have understanding approach, which is the same as participatory approach and the same as critical approach. Because sometimes when we work with community, we might unconsciously have controlling approach without realizing it. So this very clear table might help us to reflect about our own work and to think about where do we stand. Are we having more controlling curriculum and agenda with the community, or are we having more understanding and a critical and participatory approach? So to see the examples, for example, the role of the learner in the controlling environment, the role could be passive recipient and little control over what is being learned. But in understanding environment, the learner are actively shaping and engaging with theory and knowledge, so they are contributing. For example, the knowledge in controlling approach of curriculum, the knowledge is objective, detached, and measurable. And in understanding approach, the knowledge develops through a process of interaction and is tested and revised through the experience of the learner, which is closely related to dialogue, right? So if we are dialoguing with people and we give the space, then we create knowledge together with them as an emerging strategy, right? And one more thing, for example, the final one, outcomes. In controlling situation of curriculum, we usually set by external agency, not set by learners and teachers, and is easily testable. So this is what should be the final outcomes, right? This is very much related to also this development work and the NGOs when they have their own agendas and very precisely written outcomes that they want to achieve, because they do not trust the process. But if we trust the process and have participatory approach of curriculum, then the outcomes of the project or the initiative arise out of the learning process again. So outcomes are generated through the learning process and are not predictable. You can of course have have many different aspects as well. What could be controlling and understanding approach of curriculum, but this is very short example that very well conceptualizes this whole process. Thank you very much for your attention, and this was very short introduction and basic principles of community work, and I hope that you will enjoy the video and will have the further explanations of the topic in future. Bye.